Hi, and welcome to the third in my series of using Photoshop for manipulating your landscape images. Now, both of the previous videos have used this image to show how you can raise the shadows and drop the highlights. In the first case, we used a purely manual approach, and the second example, I used a color range to improve our ability to develop a mask for the sky. But in both of those cases, what we're effectively doing was creating masks that addressed the brightness of the image, i.e. the luminosity. So we were in fact creating luminosity masks. And the term luminosity mask has come to be associated with a very complex approach to creating such masks, which are immensely powerful, but can be quite daunting to get your head around. What I'm going to do now is show probably the easiest way that I've come across to create what would traditionally be called luminosity masks. And I have to give some credit here because these ideas aren't new to me. I first came across the ideas I'm going to put forward in a video by Blake Rudis of F64, and more recently a video by Jimmy McIntyre, who used this approach for people who didn't have his Actions plugin to follow along with a demonstration he was doing. So what we're going to do here is create two luminosity masks to address again the shadows and the highlights. So again, I'm going to use the curves adjustment layer, and I'm going to create two curves adjustment layers. Again, one to brighten and one to darken. And I'm not going to bother to rename these, I showed that in a previous video. But what I am going to do is I am going to use the image itself to create the mask. So I've highlighted the mask, and what I'm going to do is go to Image, Apply Image. When I can find it, there we go. And I'm just going to click OK. And what you see now is that it has created a mask based on the image. If I hold the Alt key and click on that, you can see this is the full version. So what we've got now is an area where the sky is white and the foreground is dark. And so if I just go back to this and drop the curves, you can see that I am dropping the exposure in the brights highlight area without really affecting the shadow area. Now I can use the same mask and copy it into the second area where I'm going to brighten the shadows. So if I hold the Alt key down and drag that, it will ask me if I want to replace the layer mask. Well, the layer mask that was created was blank, so yes, I do. But now I want to address the shadows and not the highlights. So I'm going to hit Control I to invert my mask. And now when I push up the curve, so I'm bringing up the shadows. And that really is all there is to it in terms of getting a basic luminosity mask. And I've created a fairly complex luminosity mask, but all I've done is use the image itself to create that. Now if I want to fine tune that, I can. So I can go to Image Adjustments and pick the levels, and now I'm wanting this to apply to the sky, so I apply to the shadows. So I want the sky to be as black as possible. So I can just adjust the levels to really blacken up the sky, and I can brighten up the foreground so I have less effect on that. And click OK. And the effect is subtle, but it's just improved the demarcation. Now I can go to the other, do exactly the same, Alt, click, go to Image Adjustments, Levels again, And this time I want the highlights as bright as possible, but I want the shadows as dark as possible. So we can just play around with this until we get that as we want it and hit OK. And there we go. So there you have two luminosity masks, one for the highlights, one for the shadows, and it's all created using the image itself as the starting point for the mask. And as with the previous two videos, all I need to do then is layer, flatten image, and save it as its original file name in its original location and format. So that is the easiest way to create luminosity masks. There are actions, channel-based methodologies that you can get. The problem I have that most of those won't work with the version of Photoshop that I'm using here. But for you just to have a simple play around with luminosity masks, if you've never used them before and you're daunted by the prospect, hopefully this will show you. It can be incredibly easy just to get started, find out what it will do for you, and if you need to adopt more subtle approaches, then those tools are available for you. And certainly have a look at Jimmy McIntyre's recent videos on using luminosity masks to adjust a single image, because it will go into much more detail than I have here and give you much more insight into the sorts of refinements you can make. So I hope you found this useful, and once again, thanks for watching.